It was fine flying weather, but still the Boeing 737 crashed. Tiny pieces of debris were all it left behind. The pilot sent out a distress signal. And then, just 6 minutes after takeoff, the plane hit the ground. In Nairobi, Kenya, people gathered to wait for Flight 302's arrival, but it never landed. At first there was confusion and complaints about the lack of information.
Everyone was asking the cabin crews what is happening, but no one was saying anything. They were just going up and down until one of the passengers saw on his mobile the first plane just crashed.
Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, as the afternoon wore on, a sickening realisation set in for passengers' loved ones. Those who departed there on Sunday morning were never coming home.
Today is a very sad and tragic day for all of us at Ethiopian Airlines and for our passengers who were on board.
Ethiopia's Civil Aviation Authority is now tasked with leading the probe. Investigators hope to find clues amid the mangled wreckage, explaining how this new Boeing plane could crash so fast. Answers to this tragedy which can't come fast enough for Ethiopians. They've been gathering at the crash site. The shock and grief this has caused is writ large on the faces of people there.
Well, our correspondent Melanie Kerr-Debal joins us now from Nairobi, where that flight was heading. Melanie, good morning to you. Details have been emerging of who was on that flight. What do we know this morning?
Brian, we know that people from all over the world were on this plane. According to Ethiopian Airlines, Kenya has the highest number of casualties. 32 Kenyans were on board, followed by Canada with 18. Ethiopia lost 9, and the US, Italy and China all had 8 nationals on board as well. The list of their names has been published, and of course we're learning more and more about the people behind these numbers. One of them, for example, was Cedric Asiavugwa. He was born and raised in Mombasa. He was a law student in DC, and he was on his way to Nairobi because his fiance's mother had died. Someone else was an Ethiopian aid worker called Tamarat Mulu Demisi. He was working with Save the Children, and his colleagues described him as someone who tirelessly worked to save vulnerable children in humanitarian crises. And of course, these are just a few of the stories, personal stories, behind these numbers of the people who lost their lives yesterday in this tragic crash.
Melanie, one day after the crash, along with all of these personal stories, what's the mood where you are?
Well, I'm here at the airport. This is where flight ET302 was scheduled to land yesterday at 10:30 in the morning. This is where relatives, family, friends, colleagues had all been waiting for hours for a plane that never arrived. Hundreds of people gathered here yesterday. Relatives were attended to in emergency centers, but a lot of people had also just come out in support. Today, the mood is sad. The airport looks a lot more quiet than usual. I've been talking to a few people who said that they're more anxious than ever, waiting for their loved ones to arrive today. We do not have confirmation yet, but it looks like the president himself could be heading out to the airport today. I've been seeing military and ceremonial uniform. While in the meantime, on social media, there is an outpouring still of messages of condolence, and you can really feel that the entire country, all of Kenya, is mourning.
DW's Melanie Kerr-Debal for us in Nairobi at the airport where that flight was headed. Thanks so very much for that, Melanie. Our aviation editor, Christoph Kober, joins us now for more on this. Good morning, Christoph. China has decided as a result of this crash to ground all of its 737 MAX 8s.
That's right. The Civil Aviation Administration says in about 2 hours from now, all 96 737 MAX aircraft that are operated by Chinese carriers need to stay on the ground until further notice. The authority says this is in line with the principle of zero tolerance for security risks. Now, this move is quite significant because it applies to about 1/4 of the global 737 MAX fleet, and it comes after Ethiopian Airlines as well as Cayman Airways have also grounded their 737 MAX fleet. Meanwhile, Boeing says it has no new guidance for the operators of this aircraft.
Okay, so safety is, of course, important for Boeing, isn't it? And the airline type, the Boeing 737, is a workhorse for so many airlines around the world. What can you tell us about the MAX 8 version?
Well, it's a new generation of this type of plane. It's Boeing's fastest-selling plane. About 350 models are in operation right now. More than 5,000 have been ordered because it's supposed to be more fuel efficient. It also features new software. So it's somewhat represents not only the future of flying for Boeing, but also the future for the company.
Now, this is the second time this exact same type of aircraft has crashed. We saw Lion Airlines about, 4 or 5 months ago. Similar crash there in Indonesia. Is there any link, or is it too early to talk about that?
It is quite early to talk about that. However, there are similarities that are hard to ignore. Both were virtually brand new planes, apart from the fact that it was the very same type of plane. Both brand new, both featuring problems or facing problems in the same stage of flight right after takeoff. And although we should not jump to conclusions, there are some indicators that both planes behaved similarly right before the crash. And this is raising eyebrows among experts.
And we will know more once we have the black box, the voice recorder. The search continues for that, right?
That's right. The intensified search for these two devices, because the flight data recorder as well as the voice recorder from the flight deck, they report hundreds of sets of data, and they can even withstand, really hard impacts, as in this case happened, crashing into the ground with flight ET-302. So once these devices are recovered, which hopefully will happen rather quickly, then, investigators can paint a rather detailed picture of what happened on this flight.
And Christoph, we'll have more from you later in this hour on this story, right?
That's right.
Christoph Kober for us. Thanks so very much.